When taking a look at the history of relationships in comic books, especially superhero comics, there's probably not many as messy and as tumultuous as the one between Scott and Jean. And the early 90s period between them was arguably the roughest of them all. There were a lot of curveballs thrown their way that made maintaining their relationship especially difficult. And one of those curveballs was their fellow X-Men, Psylocke. For whatever reason, she made it her life's mission to essentially steal Scott away from Jean. In this panel from X-Men Volume 2, number 8, she comes out of the water, thirst trapping for all to see. And let's just say Scott is very interested. Jean's trying to ask him a question about Professor X, and he's just like basically stuttering through his thoughts. And Jean understandably gets mad. And the little smirk from Psylocke, shows that her plan is set in motion. And in the issue right after this one, they end up in a tunnel due to some shenanigans with Ghost Rider. And so Scott's trying to help her up out of the rubble. So he offers her hand, but clearly she wants more than just his hand. Fast forward to issue 20 when the final stage of her plan is executed. She shows up to the house in a crazy party dress, which in all honesty, there's no reason for her to be dressed this up, because there's nothing special going on in the house at that particular date. She makes her way to the hangar bay where Scott's working on the X-Jet, and she sneaks in very quietly, hoping that Scott doesn't notice, and he doesn't. So she then, causes a little accident to happen that makes them entangled. Scott, being as oblivious as an anime protagonist, clumsily apologizes. But Psylocke's not interested in the apology. She licks the oil off his face and then pulls him in and kisses him. Scott pushes her off and says that he can't do this. Psylocke asks why. She's very convinced that this is something that he wants as well. But then he says he doesn't even know what he wants. And then Jean shows up conveniently or inconveniently, depending on who you ask, asking about lunch plans between them. Scott's not trying to hear anything about lunch plans at the moment. He storms up the stairs looking like an American Ryu with the white sleeveless and the red bandana. And then in the corner of her eye, she notices that Psylocke was in the room with Scott. And of course, Psylocke had to throw another jab in there with a comment about the lunch plans. And in the immediate aftermath, Jean has an existential crisis about what their relationship really means. How being an X-Men hurt it potentially, changed it. She's just really at a loss because she doesn't even know the person that she's supposed to love the most anymore. She doesn't really know what he wants or his desires. And for Scott, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. He ends up taking a leave of absence, right? He tells Professor X he's going to go to Alaska to see his grandparents. He just needs time away from all of it, from Jean, from the X-Men, from all of this. And on his way out, he can barely even look at Jean. He doesn't even say 2 words to her before he turns around and walks out the door. As soon as Scott leaves, she tells the computer to locate Psylocke.
It's about to go down.
She's in the danger room training, as she often does, and Jean walks in and tells her that she needs to talk. And she says, about what? And of course, Jean goes, about Scott. And then Psylocke's like, why would we need to be discussing Scott? She knows what she's doing. So Jean just straight up asks Psylocke if her and Scott are having an affair. And her answer is essentially, I wish. She says that while they aren't technically having an affair, she wants to. And that Scott never smiles when he's with Jean. And she basically just says straight up to Jean's face, she wants to steal her man. And naturally, Jean doesn't take these words too kindly. She says that, well, maybe if they aren't having an affair, that she's telepathically manipulating him. And Betsy turns her back on her and she says, don't turn your back on me. And she demands an answer from her. And this is when Psylocke snaps. She catches Jean off guard and uses one of her psychic blades to render Jean unconscious. And then literally out of nowhere, an image of Psylocke's former self appears in front of her. She thinks that this was just, a backhanded maneuver that Jean did before she passed out. And she's like almost impressed that Jean had it in her to do such a duplicitous maneuver, as she puts it. But it turns out this person is not a hologram, and they claim they're the real Betsy, and the one who just fought with Jean over Scott was an imposter the whole time. But that's a story for another day. If you like this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and I'll catch you in the next one.